Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of our Lennox on Baseball live stream podcast. We talked with Matt Birch yesterday. We encourage you to go take a look at that on our YouTube page, Lennox on Baseball, and our Facebook page as well. Today, we welcome in, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this one because this takes me back to my childhood in the 1980s. I've often talked about the show, The Baseball Bunch, and I was doing some research, and thanks to Marty Appel, longtime PR man for the New York Yankees, who we're going to have on Thursday. Marty put me in touch with Geoff Belinfante, who was the executive producer with MLB Productions in the 1970s and 1980s, worked on This Week in Baseball, worked with Mel Allen, worked with Warner Fusel. Spoke with Geoff a few weeks ago, and he said, you know what? Absolutely ready, willing, and able to do it. Geoff Belinfante was the executive producer of the Baseball Bunch. I mentioned This Week in Baseball as well. And Geoff was instrumental in getting Rich Domich, who was a producer on the Baseball Bunch, and Jody Shapiro as well. All three join us right now. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We're all in the Northeast. We've all got power. I'm sort of jealous of Jody right now because he's still up in Maine, although he's been there since mid-March. But thanks so much. And we'll get right into it. And Geoff, I'll start with you. Take us back to the early stages as the Baseball Bunch was ready to launch, and sort of your role and how it came about with Major League Baseball Productions.
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best person to talk about this, but I'll start it and then I'm going to throw it to Jody to pick up the pieces. But when we were working with Major League Baseball, and at that particular time, we were actually still part of what was then called Major League Baseball Promotion Corporation. Baseball had some research that was telling them that they weren't doing very well with kids. The kids were playing basketball and some other sports, and they weren't playing baseball as much. And so they were looking for a way to, appeal to kids. And, we tossed around some ideas. And the idea of a children's show was embraced by the Lords of Baseball at the time. And we set about doing it. And then I think, Jody, you should take up the whole thing from there with Doug Shustic and Bench's Bunch.
Yeah. So essentially what was happening was that Major League Baseball Productions, which, as Jeff said, was an arm of Major League Baseball itself, had launched the television show This Week in Baseball. And it was a syndicated show. It was on a half-hour basis, and most of the stations across the country were running it just before the NBC Game of the Week, which, taking it back years and years, there was one national game of the week. It was on Saturdays. It was usually around 1:30 or 2 o'clock. So This Week in Baseball typically had a half-hour slot just prior to the live game itself. And so one of the ideas that they were kicking around, as Jeff said, we're trying to figure out how to get younger and how to get a younger audience. So the idea was to create another half-hour show that would be a companion to This Week in Baseball. So we would do, at 1 o'clock, we do the Baseball Bunch or some other show, and at 1:30 we do This Week in Baseball, and 2 o'clock would be the live game. So while we were thinking about that, a gentleman named Doug Shustic came in and presented us with an idea that he had been developing with Johnny Bench, called Bench's Bunch. And Doug had, basically the kernel of the idea of how to do a kid show, which was basically Johnny would teach kids how to play baseball. And so we took that idea of Doug's and essentially kind of incorporated into the production arm of Major League Baseball Productions and made it our own. We kind of took Doug's idea and then expanded it from there. So that's sort of it. The genesis of it was Doug Shustic bringing Johnny Bench to us, and then Major League Baseball itself kind of took off on the idea.
As you guys were putting ideas to them and to Johnny Bench, what were some of the things as to how you ultimately came up to streamline the show? How was it working with Johnny Bench at that point in time? And I get a kick out of that we're talking about Johnny Bench because I saw him in just another commercial last week.
Yeah. As it turned out, Johnny was great. I mean, he was very personable, very camera friendly, camera ready. I would tell you. And the beauty of sort of what Johnny brought, not only was he a personality and he could handle the television, but the respect he had from the other players in the league was just, off the charts. So if we wanted to, to get anybody to come on the show as a guest, either asking Johnny to make the call, or, which was rare, usually we would do the call ourselves. But if we would tell people, hey, Johnny's the host, we want you to be the guest, nobody turned that down. That was an invitation that was just too good to pass up.
And they didn't do it for the money, because there wasn't a lot of money for people. In fact, that's one of the obstacles I think about bringing the show back these days, is that we didn't pay these guys. It was really an honorarium to travel to Tucson and shoot this. But Jody, maybe you should talk a little bit about the pilot that we did at Pepperdine. Remember that?
Sure. Sorry, guys, I got a call coming. So. I think to Jeff's point, I think we're paying him $500 a guest appearance.
Yeah, it was something. It was either 500 or 1,000. I don't remember, but it wasn't very much.
I think we pushed it up to 1,000.
Yeah, I think it got to 1,000 by the end of the show, yeah. But they weren't doing it for the money.
No. So it's to Jeff's point about the pilot. So we put together a show. We had an idea. The idea was to have young kids. We originally came up with 8 to 14-year-olds. That was the age bracket, and the idea was we took Doug Schustek's idea, expanded it a whole lot more, had the kids be an integral part of the show itself, and have Johnny be the host of it. We shot a pilot in LA at Pepperdine. It just really kind of an internal pilot. Really it was a production tool and a sales tool. As well, and that was kind of when I look back on it, it was sort of it was a rather bland and kind of not a very inspiring production, but it gave us the full scope of what we could do with kids and Johnny, and then we took that pilot back and kind of expanded on the idea. In a couple of very creative and entertaining ways. We added a mascot to the show, and then we also added a live character mascot in Tommy Lasorda. So we went back and saw it. Okay, how could we add an entertainment element to the show, and that involved, if we were going to put a mascot in, then the obvious mascot was the chicken, because he was the most popular by far, and the most entertaining. I mean, he was really a great character. And the beauty of the chicken was that he also was somebody who he was kid friendly. He wasn't he was the right size. He was the right costume for that. So his interaction was really great. And then Lasorda, being kind of the dugout wizard, was another idea we had, of just sort of expanding the elements you could add into the show beyond just instruction.
We'll touch on that as well. Rich, you sort of set the bar very high early on in your professional career, because this was your first job, yes?
It was. It was my first job. I interviewed with another friend of mine, Gary Cohen, with Jody. I'm not sure if I interviewed with you, Jeff, but I probably did. And our first gig was, it was a part-time gig, was as a production assistant for the baseball bunch. And we were in New York at the time. I had lived in San Francisco, but I was visiting New York. I was prepared to do whatever I had to do. Knew a little bit about that the baseball bunch was going to be going on, and that, we were pitching ourselves as production assistants. We got the gig, and my friend's dad got us a used car, and we drove to Tucson, Arizona. We went to Florida and took a right. But every single day, we had at least 2 times a day we worked out. We thought we were going to spring training. And as it turns out, that was a good thing, because when we got there, I had the best gig ever. And it was the very first gig. So it was downhill after that. I was a decent batting practice pitcher. I got to throw batting practice to every one of the hitters on the baseball bunch. We would set up cameras and plexiglass, no nets at the very beginning, and we would shoot, a million different ways. We called it diamond footage of everybody hitting, and I would pitch, and it was from Johnny Bench to Willie Stargell, Mike Schmidt. I got to pitch to Ted Williams. Ridiculous, a little frightening at one time. I'm involved in youth softball and baseball, and have been really kind of all my life. I'm a lot more safety conscious than I was back then. Throwing batting practice to Mike Schmidt. And Mike Schmidt is hitting bullets, and he kind of has that southern drawl, and he says, if y'all don't get him a net, I think I might kill him. Or a screen. And he was right. But yeah, high bar, really, really high bar time of my life.
Steve, let me pick up on two things that Rich said. Number one, the baseball bunch, we knew that it had to be more than just instruction, which is what Jody had said. The pilot allowed us to see that we needed another element to make this show something different. And that was where, each show had a theme. We would chat with each of the ball players, find out what they were interested in, and kind of build the show around, either their nickname, like the Wizard, when we did the Ozzie Smith show, or other things to give the show a piece of entertainment. The other thing that Rich didn't tell you is that he was the only one who had ever coached a team. And he knew all sorts of drills and things to do with kids. And a lot of those things were built into the show. So he's downplaying his role there, but he was very important in the teaching aspect of the show, which he's still doing to this day with his daughters. So there you go.
So how did it come about with the kids that you were getting in the local area where you were shooting, the 8 to 14-year-old kids? Was there a screening process? Rich, did you take them through drills and see that they had some, at least a foundation of a skill set?
We had casting calls, and we went through, we had open tryouts, and we had casting calls. And as I do recall, we certainly put, the ones that kind of made the cut through some kind of drills. Although I would say that, a couple of them that made the show were not necessarily baseball friendly. And that was, part of the charm of it. One of the little girls, Stacy, was just adorable, good actress. Not super polished or anything, but she wasn't a really good baseball player. Whereas the other girl was an excellent baseball player. So
just to pick up on Rich's comment. So, the original idea was to have a mixture of kids, kids, minority kids, girls and boys, and also kids who could play and kids who could not play. That was a very conscious decision on our part. We were not interested in having superstars or kids who could throw, a curveball or anything of that sort. The idea was from the very beginning was that this was going to be a general entertainment instructional show. It was not designed to teach, to have people tune in for half an hour and learn the intricacies of the game. It was really just how do you have fun, and how can anybody in any age group have fun along the way. So that was a very conscious decision on the part. And actually, one of the things that I'm most proud of with the show is that we not only did the show win some Emmys, but we actually won some children's awards, television children's awards that recognized that this was not just a sports show. It was actually a show to try to empower kids about playing baseball, playing a sport, and how to participate in a group activity that happened to be baseball. And Johnny was great about that. He was really he really understood how to approach kids of all shapes and sizes and skill levels. And that worked out really great.
I still run into many people today that when they find out that I was involved in the baseball bunch, we'll talk about it, all levels. I ran into somebody. I'm involved in a youth sports business. Ran into somebody who has an extensive baseball development company. Does a lot online, but also works with the Chicago Cubs. And I mentioned the baseball bunch. Have you heard about it? And he just said, "Changed my life." And I said, "Change your life? What do you mean?" And he said, "The Ozzie Smith show." And I said, "Oh, you played wall ball?" Because Ozzie showed how he played wall ball. He threw the ball against the wall, and that's how he learned how to do walls. And he goes, "Yep, changed my life. I played wall ball, for forever after that." And I can't tell you how that just warms my heart. And we heard from major leaguers too that had got some inspiration from the baseball bunch. I can't remember any right off the top of my head, but really cool. And I got to tell you this, and I want to ask you guys this question, because I get this question all the time. Sometimes online, if somebody finds me, or in person, and they say, "Well, the oddest thing about the baseball bunch is why were all the kids wearing jeans?" Who wears jeans playing?
I did on my front lawn hitting wiffle balls.
Well, and so I've been asking people, and some of them that are more my age said, "Well, that's what we played back then because we didn't have, all the athletic gear. That's what we did. We played in jeans."
Absolutely. Certainly that's what I played in, jeans, in my backyard.
But Rich, that goes to the idea that these were not special kids. We put a jersey on them. We created a logo and put a jersey on them, but that was about it. We didn't have any. There were no identifications. There was no. We didn't have a shoe deal. We didn't have a uniform deal. It was just kind of like these are kids getting together, and and they're just normal. They're average.
We missed a huge opportunity with Levi's.
I'm surprised Terry wasn't all over that. Terry was our sales lady at the time, but anyway, I also want to pick up on something that Jody said about Johnny. Not only was he really into doing the show, he was really good working with his fellow athletes who may or may not have had any acting experience at the time. Johnny would actually help people get through the script. And there was a script. There were lines, and we knew where we wanted to go, at least especially in the entertainment parts of the show. But, these guys are not professional actors. And Johnny was very good at leading them to where they had to go. And while there was a lot of post-production involved, we did get through it. And a lot of that credit has to go to Johnny, who was on camera and helped all of his fellow ball players get through the script.
He was another producer and director on the set, and he cared. I mean, he really cared. He cared about the kids. He cared about the show. He cared about just how we presented it, and I dare say he cared about all of us. He became a friend and a real good guy. That was a distinct privilege.
You talk about the guest players weren't getting rich. The $500 or $1,000 for the appearance. Johnny Bench didn't do it for the money either.
No.
It was not like there was a major stipend going any way through it.
You mentioned his Rolodex and how he got guys to come onto the show. Were there, all these years later, do you think about guys who, the 5-year run, were there players that, were they chomping at the bit? Were they sort of petitioning him and you guys to get on there, and guys that you didn't get on that maybe you wanted to?
Well, there are always guys who you miss. But, as I recall, there really wasn't anyone, at least I did the first 2 years. I produced the first 2 years. There wasn't anyone who we really wanted in those first 2 years who couldn't do it. Sometimes it's a scheduling issue or something like that. But, I think somebody mentioned Ted Williams. That was sort of, in the beginning, that was kind of like the biggest get, because Ted was not, he was not interested in talking to the media. His profile was very low, but that's a superstar that you just couldn't if you could get him, you just couldn't not appeal to that. And we had there was an emissary from Major League Baseball's commissioner's office named Joe Reichler. And he was sort of our, we were all kids. I mean, the three of us on this call, back in those days, we were making it up as we went along, truly making it up as we went along.
For sure.
So we had like a father figure, this guy Joe Reichler, who has since passed away. But he was sort of he would make sure that we didn't cross a line. That if we thought of an idea that it still meshed with how Major League Baseball wanted things to be presented. And Reichler knew Ted Williams from his days as a reporter. So Reichler was the one who called Ted and got him to come on. But having Ted come on with Johnny Bench was, that's a no-brainer. It just made total sense.
And the prop that you built for that show is in the Hall of Fame to this day.
That's right.
It showed how Williams perceived the strike zone, as I recall, right, Jody?
It's from his book, The Science of Hitting.
Yeah.
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 I should give a special shout out to one of the writers on the original on the first shows, a man named Mark Durand, who really was very strong creative presence in the shows, and that to Rich's point about or maybe it's Jeff's, sort of making sure that the theme of the show went along with the athlete who was the guest athlete. And so, a lot of the shtick, the bits we came up with, at least in the first couple of years that I did it, were very helpful with Mark Durand, who kind of was a creative force behind a lot of the ideas we had.
We should talk about that day just for a second. I have that day. I think it was like the first show that season. So I know my arm was rusty, but Ted was not going to hit, and we shamelessly had the little girl that I mentioned before, Stacy Blight. She went up off camera and just tugged on his. Hey, Mr. Williams, will you hit for us? She must have been 9, maybe even 8.
Not even. I bet.
And he couldn't say no. So he takes off his fishing jacket, and he's got a Red Sox jersey on like Superman. And all right, and now it's time. All right, so now you're going to throw to him. Damo's my nickname. And I started throwing to him, and he kept saying, I couldn't find the plate. And he kept saying, throw. And I knew what he wanted to do. He kept saying, throw harder. And I said, okay, I'll throw a little harder. Throwing harder, throw harder. No, throw as hard as you can. And I literally looked upstairs and I said, oh my God, I am throwing as hard as I can. Please, God, don't let me hit Ted. Please, God. And what he wanted to do was say, you can always adjust for a fastball, no matter how hard somebody throws. But my fastball was like a changeup to him. And then all of a sudden I found the plate, and he just hit line drive after line drive after line drive. And Ted Williams, wow, just incredible.
Did he have any back and forth with you after your round was over?
I don't recall. I don't recall anything. I was sweating bullets. Yeah. And the night before was pretty cool. We usually took the athlete out for dinner, and we would discuss the show, but he didn't really want to do that. But he invited us into his hotel room. You guys remember that? And we went up to his hotel room, and he has this aura like John Wayne. He speaks like John Wayne. It's a little intimidating, but we went into his room, and he was there in his BVDs, in his boxer shorts, showing us how to hit and his theory of hitting. And it was, are you kidding me? Is this all happening? Yeah.
He could talk hitting forever and ever and ever. That was his thing. It was later on.
For us who were working on the show, one of the beauties of it was that you got these incredible superstars, who would be there for 2 days, at least 2 days. You know, they had to show up on day one, they'd spend the night, then they'd work day two, and if they wanted to, they could spend another night, or they could just hop on a plane and get out of town. But you know, we had an opportunity to really be with these guys, you know, in a very casual, comfortable setting. You know, and you know, as someone said, none of the guys were camera, you know, had really been trained as to be in front of a camera. So our idea was to make them as comfortable as possible, so that they could get through their routine, and that was so if we get to know them, they got more comfortable in terms of working with us.
Rich
Yeah,
mentioned.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Geoff, please.
Well, I was going to tell you that along that line, I remember shooting with Andre Dawson.
I was going to say the same thing.
And he seemed to know the script. He seemed to have like memorized the script more so than any other player who had been on the bunch. And so we said to him, "So Andre, you really got into this. You really memorized the script." And he said, "Yeah, my wife wouldn't let me leave the house unless I could, you know, recite the script to her or something like that." So that was kind of funny.
And that was the script. That was actually a pretty good script, Jody. It was after you had left. Andre Dawson is the hawk, and chickens are afraid of the hawk. So that was the whole thing, that the chicken was afraid that there was a hawk, and he was eavesdropping, and it was it was actually, you know, it was
pretty funny. It was funny.
It was funny. And, you know, we did some campy, cheesy things back there, but, you know, that was funny. And we would be totally remiss if we didn't talk about the comedic genius.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the chicken. I mean, how many times, guys, when we, as Jody, you said, we're winging it, we're making it up as it is, that we would say, "Ted, what do you got? Let's have the chicken do something."
Right.
The other thing we should mention when we're talking about Ted is that Jody and I think, are the only two people other than Ted to have ever worn the chicken costume.
Wow.
Right, Jody? See, both of us are small, and Ted is small. So we fit into the chicken costume. It wasn't that we were great actors. We just happened to fit.
Right.
It wasn't that. And believe me, Ted just didn't say, "Hey, guys, you know, I need a blow." Ted was one of the hardest working people in entertainment. He always, there was a couple off days, he was somewhere else, and I think it was some problem with getting back to the set exactly on time, and there were some plane delays, something like that, and you guys had to step in, as it were.
Again, our deal with Ted was that he could continue to do his minor league gig, and he would travel all over the country. So he would fly in and out of Tucson all the time. And, you know, sometimes there were connection problems, and we had to shoot. So there were times when we had to fill in for him. So
how much of the San Diego chicken? How much of the chicken was ad-libbed, where you just shot whatever he did, or were you kind of together in terms of, you know, what you wanted from him?
It was both. So, you know, we would certainly write in to scripts. You know, Rich talked about, you know, the hawk and the chicken. So we would clearly write in, you know, his routines. But there were a lot of times, as someone said, where, you know, we'd be shooting, and, you know, everybody, you know, so we did have a script. So every kid had to memorize, you know, their particular line, and we'd go line by line, and, you know, it was a rather formal process that we did in terms of shooting. But sometimes, you know, you get on, and there were often times where Ted just spontaneously did something, you know, that made what we were trying to illustrate come alive, whether it was throwing a ball, dropping a ball, falling down on the ground, picking up a kid and running around the bases with him. I mean, a lot of this stuff was spontaneous on his part, and you know, he there was an element of real vaudeville that he added to the show that you know, from our original conception to what Ted actually did with it is, you know, like from 1 to 1,000 in terms of his ability to make it come alive for us. And
every season, I think we push the envelope more and more because, you know, the writers would figure out, well, he can do a lot. Let's do more. And I remember the Bill Russell show when we were teaching some about being a lesson about being a good teammate, and the chicken walked off and he was mad at his team, and then he boxed. He was the world's greatest boxer. He played tennis. He blew a serve through somebody's racket. He golfed. And the cool thing about Ted was, and the outfit, he could do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So now,
it's amazing to me that he was able to do that. Having worn that, you've got tunnel vision. You can't see. I don't know how he was able to do anything.
The chicken wearing a cardigan sweater and swinging a golf club that's funny. That's funny. We had him riding a motorcycle at one point. Yeah. He cracked Johnny up all the time. Sometimes the scripts were a little ambitious, and especially in the later years, and you had a lot to do, and got a little tense, and all we needed was the chicken to do something, and it would crack Johnny up, and that was nice. Fun.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that the chicken, he was the first of them. His mother had made the original chicken soup, right? And like I said, you could only see out of the beak. But the other problem was that the beak had to look down in order for the eye contact to be right with the suit. So not only did you have limited vision, but you had to be looking towards the ground in order to have the head in the right attitude. Like I said, I don't know how he was able to field ground balls. I don't know how he was able to do anything in that suit. It's a testimony to his athletic ability, which was great.
I think at one point or another, you've all mentioned the Dugout Wizard. How did Tommy Lasorda come about? And was he on location, or was that something that he was able to record away from where you guys were?
Yeah, Rich and I were talking earlier before we got on. I don't recall how we came up with the idea of putting, having a wizard, if you will. I can tell you from a purely production perspective, the show was 3 acts, and we knew that that the first act and the second act were going to be instruction. We were looking around for what could be a third act, and what was one that we didn't have to actually do a lot of production on, and we could kind of handle in post-production. So whoever came up with the Dugout Wizard idea, my guess is it probably was Mark Duran, the writer I mentioned, but I don't remember.
I think it was Joe Reichler who made the contact with Tommy. He wanted to include Tommy because he thought it would be good, and I think Mark came up with the idea of making the Dugout Wizard. I think you're right about that.
Yeah,
I think that's the way.
So to your point, Steve, it filmed in another location. Lasorda never came to Tucson, never interacted with Bench, and I'm not sure, let alone forget whether how we came up with the idea, whatever. I'm not sure who persuaded Tommy to put on a wizard hat. And do all that, and I as a producer, I kind of remember thinking I'm amazed that he would that he'd go along with the shtick as much as he did. But he was great. He got into it. It was a fun element, and it was one of those really kind of again, we were kind of making up as we went along. It was just one of those things that kind of worked really nicely into the format of the show.
Yeah, I think I ended up shooting Tommy most of the time in spring training in Vero Beach at the time, which is where the Dodgers trained. And I would go down and we would shoot him after dinner most of the time, usually in a locker room somewhere in the Vero Beach complex. And I remember having to carry the wizard gear with me for him, but I don't remember. He knew he was going to wear it when I got there. So I wasn't the one who had to tell him he was going to wear a wizard gear. Thank goodness. But I did get to deal with him after, how should we say this? After dinner. And most of the time he had at least 1 or 2 cocktails before we did the wizard shoot. And that was always a challenge. Always a challenge.
Rich, jump in there.
Well, I was going to say, and I don't know, Jody, does anybody remember who the Dugout Wizard's father was?
Ooh.
Anybody?
No.
No, go
So
for it.
I shamelessly, my favorite comedian was Don Rickles.
Oh, that's right.
And he was performing in Westbury. I had seen him 30 times. And I said, we got to find a way to get him on the show. I know he's friends with Lasorda. We just made some calls and he agreed to do it. And we shot a little bit in Westbury of him being the Dugout Wizard's father. And oh my God. I got to meet him. I was up this close to him. And he said, Lasorda? And I said, yeah. He goes, man doesn't spend a dime. I went into his locker room the other day. I thought I was in Nicaragua. He started doing his routine. He was the nicest guy. After we wrapped, it was with John Vassar and Tony Tachi. His guy came and said, Mr. Rickles would like to see you in his dressing room. And he had a drink for us and said, say hi to Tommy. Good luck with the baseball bunch. You guys are doing good stuff.
Yeah.
Don
really great. It's really
yeah.
I mean, a lot of what happened here is that again, sort of we were making up as we went along, but someone like Lasorda, when he agreed to do it, to be the Dugout Wizard, and then he saw what it looked like, he kept on doing it. I mean, a lot of the actions here were players who sort of, they loved being part of the game, being part of the shows, being part of Johnny Bench's world. I'm not even sure we did pay Lasorda. I mean, it may have been, something along the way.
I think we did. But yeah, but it wasn't much. Nobody was doing this for the money.
But Geoff, when you went down to Vero, did you shoot one for the next week, or did you try to put 3, 4, 5 together for the season?
We gang shot them. We shot them all at the same time. Yeah, so yeah, that was the only way to efficiently do that. And it worked out very well. The only thing that we should do, Jody mentioned Mark Duran, we probably should do a shout out to the other writers who contributed to this. Jim Rogal, Steve Stern, and I even think Hal Fisher, right? Didn't Hal write a couple of them too?
Yeah,
They were the guys who were challenged to go and call the ball players and do a preliminary interview with them to find out what they were interested in. And from their interest came, the ideas for the show. Or, as Domo said, with the Hawk, we said, hey, there's the Hawk. So we presented that to them. But in a lot of cases, remember Keith Hernandez was a history buff, right?
Keith Hernandez. One, he was a history buff. So we came up with the idea of doing a game show where he was the host. But the other thing is, his dad had built a contraption in his basement that had a ball hanging from it that he would be able, now they sell these things, to at the height of the ball, practice your swing. And so if we could find something like that, or wall ball, that Ozzy did, it humanized them, and it made for, that guy that I told you that changed his life. It was like, well, wait a second, I can do the same thing. It's not, now build a contraption a little bit different, but it just kind of humanized everything. And we also, let me just,
go ahead.
My two best buddies, Gary Cohen and Mike Tolan, who was the first director of the baseball bunch and has gone on to great things. And so is Gary, really great things. I know that this, like all of us, it was like kind of our first gigs, really has a soft spot in their hearts.
And one final name, at least on my side, Tony Tachi, who was producer, director, and editor. He's passed away, but these are, core names in terms of everything we were doing, including This Week in Baseball and Race for the Pennant, another show we did for HBO. I mean, we were a very close group of people, working day and night. I mean, like the production schedule for the baseball bunch was do a show every day. I mean, it was not, there were very few days off along the way. Tucson was chosen because it was not going to rain a lot. Jeff said that he did all 8 or so Wizards in one sitting. I mean, we were like rolling them out.
Yeah, we had to be efficient because we didn't have any money, so we had to work smarter, right? We had to try and figure out how to do this on a shoestring. Which
Geoff,
we did.
You mentioned the writers that you tipped your cap to, and Rich as well. Of the guy who Ozzie Smith and Wall Ball changed his life. The one that I always remember as a kid is, and I think it was Ted Simmons, switch hitting catcher. The word ambidextrous. That's where I learned that word, is that he could do things with his left hand and with his right hand. So that, again, a credit to the people that talked to him and found that storyline.
Well, by the way, that is the other show that had multiple chickens, because we had righty Ted and lefty Ted, and somehow the chicken, the mad scientists, created multiple chickens, and there were chickens all over. It had a George Romero zombie feel to it, Jody. There's also a funny thing on that episode. We had, we were doing the split screens and lockdown cameras to do righty Ted and lefty Ted. And lefty Ted was going to show you how to hit the opposite way to left field. So we probably had 14 crew people all around. It was a tight shot. So my job was just to underhand the ball to Ted, and he was just going to push the ball to the left field. I do it, and he unloads. He takes a full swing, and a line drive just shoots by me. Everybody stays quiet for a second, and he comes over and hugs me, and he said, "I am so sorry, and I am so happy you are still here." I'd say my life passed in front of me. It happened so fast that there was.
Did you have any type of insurance at that point? I mean, you talk about Ted Williams, Ted Simmons, Mike Schmidt.
Boy, Jody, did we have any insurance?
Yeah, absolutely, we did have insurance.
Yeah, okay. we had E&O insurance. Yes, we had to have that in order to get it on the network. The NBC affiliates required that we had certain production insurance. So yes, we had insurance. I'm not sure we covered that, but that's a different issue.
We're not insured for the lunacy that we created.
Right. Yeah. They certainly didn't. They didn't insure the creative product. That's for sure.
That's
with the kids that were part of it for the 5 years, there were a handful that went all 5 years. There were a couple that just did 1 year and they were out. Any contact with them in the years after the show wrapped up?
Dama, you had, right?
Yeah, Dama, that's yours.
With a lot of them. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but with some of them, and sometimes they would come into town. They would visit. Or visit our operation. I know periodically when we changed formats, we would make dubs or DVDs and give them copies. And I know Johnny some of the kids stayed in touch with Johnny. If those kids showed up somewhere Johnny was, they were treated like royalty. We were a family. And it was pretty cool. It was way cool.
You stayed in touch with Stacy, didn't you, Dama?
No, Linda.
Oh, Linda. Okay, yeah.
Linda Coslet. I did run across. I was doing some business, and there was this country advertising association, and I just happened to look at one of the board members, and it was Stacy. It was one of the board members, and I meant to reach out to her, and I didn't. So maybe this will remind me, to do that.
That's funny.
Yeah. And the other thing, I don't know about you guys, but we became friends with some of these players. As Jody said, it was a casual atmosphere. They didn't have any pressure. It was off season. And, we got to be friendly with them. And I will tell you that, I am still good friends with and count him as a really dear friend, Dusty Baker, who was on the show. That's another byproduct of this that was really, really cool.
We talked a little bit about players that we wish we had gotten. I can't remember. Do we ever get Steve Garvey? I think we finally did, right? Never got Steve Garvey, right?
No, we got Steve, and then he had to cancel.
He's on the list. He's on a list that I have. I mean, it's the source being what it is.
I'm pretty sure that he had to cancel and we didn't have him.
I thought we got him back. He canceled once on us.
You think we got
but then back? I think we got him back. I think. You say, Steve, you said you have him on a list?
He's on a list of, again, it's, my source is Wikipedia, take it for what it is. But he's on, I mean, I remember going down through a lot of them and saying, yep, I remember Ted Simmons. I remember Keith Hernandez. I remember Ozzie Smith. That one I don't recall. Bill Russell is the one I think Rich brought up. So he's on there.
Yeah, I see him on that list. I'm just not convinced.
I have to go. I have them all downstairs. I'll go look. After this, I have recordings of all of them on VHS, and I still have a VHS machine. So
of course you do.
So along those lines, and I'll have all three of you, and we'll start with Geoff. This has never been picked up. I mean, Major League Baseball Productions. This has never, I don't think, ever run. And on Twitter, I pleaded with the MLB Network to run. I mean, you could run it on Christmas Day. You could run it on New Year's Eve. I'd be there. Surprised that it's never been all these years later. I mean, you can see the YouTube clips, but nothing else.
Yeah, good question. And I have no answer for that question because no one from the current regime has ever reached out to me or anybody else that I know of to talk about the baseball bunch. You're the first one. I can't tell you why they haven't. I also can't tell you why they haven't revived the idea. So, that you'll have to ask the folks who are in charge now. Jody, any ideas? Have you ever talked to anybody? Damo?
Well, they do have a lot of play ball initiatives and the show with Harold Reynolds that, they're making some reach outs to kids. I had always assumed or heard, now I'm trying to think if some of the lawyers at baseball had told me, we used a lot of popular music back in those days. That was one of the things we were known for, doing roll-in clips cut to music that we probably didn't have proper clearances way back then.
Not probably.
Yeah, that could be one of the reasons why it doesn't run. That would be, tough changing that. And, perhaps they thought that a lot of the clearances and rights weren't buttoned up, but I'd sure like to see them. Fox started running some old This Week in Baseballs during the COVID, and how tremendous was that? That was great. But yeah. Jody,
add in there?
No, I really don't. I don't know why that they haven't. I think to Rich's idea, I think baseball, they do enough on the instructional side. But remember, the idea for this show was not to be purely instructional baseball. It was really an entertainment show, and I think that's just not where the league is at the moment.
And as Geoff touched on in the very beginning in prior conversation that I had with him leading up to this, this was to put something geared towards children, and Major League Baseball still has that to this day, all these years later, of, marketing and growing the game at that level, at that 8, 9, 10 grassroots level.
Yeah, they still have that same issue. Yep.
Gentlemen, I've absolutely go ahead, Geoff.
I was going to say, and you'd think that would be an impetus for them to try and revive the baseball bunch or use the old episodes or do something, and yet they haven't. So again, maybe it has to do with music clearances, although music can be, changed. And they certainly did change some of the music that we had originally used on some of the home videos that they released or re-released, I should say. Damo, your Amazing Era, the Mets film that we did was full of popular music, and they completely changed all of that and re-released it. So that could be done.
Yep.
There's something else going on, and I have no idea what it is. Love to see it back on the air. I'd love to watch. I enjoyed watching the old This Week in Baseballs. I have a few scattered episodes in my collection, but it was nice to see them again. So, hey, who knows? Yeah, you'll have to talk to somebody else, Steve, about that one.
Will do. It's been an absolute pleasure. I do want to wrap up and give you all one more opportunity. Anything perhaps we didn't go over, or just a final thought? And Jody, we'll start with you.
My final thought is just sort of, you can see from the three of us talking, the love that we all have for producing the show, for baseball itself, for the people that we worked with. I mean, I hope that's, if people got nothing else out of this podcast, they got that sense of the feeling that we all had. As someone mentioned, we're family, and I think you got that from the three of us talking, and it's great memories, and really, proud of the work, proud of just being associated with the two guys here and with everyone involved in the show.
I have to echo those sentiments. It was, I tell people it was just a privilege. It was a tremendous privilege to have worked on that show. And one of my fondest memories is when all the equipment would come in and the players' uniforms would come in, and we would, hey, can we try on Bucky Dent's or Chet Lemon's? And it was, we had the keys to that little league stadium. So the new equipment would come out, and we would go out and we would play at night. We'd turn on the lights and we'd play. We loved baseball. We loved what we were doing, and we knew it was a privilege back then, even that we were young, that we were playing, we were with future Hall of Famers, and tremendous privilege.
Yeah, we were really living the dream, as it were. I mean, if you were a baseball fan, if you were into television production, you got a chance to do this wonderful show and have fun doing it. And I think that would be true. I mean, look, there were tense moments, as Jody said. We had our problems, but we all worked through it. And again, it was a lot of fun to work on. And I'm glad that some of that fun shows up on the screen. And we're all very proud of the work that we did. We're proud of the Emmy that we got for, it was a special recognition Emmy, right? The first one, Jody? That recognized.
We got two.
Yeah, that recognized that this was something that no one had done in the world of sports up to that point. And so it was fulfilling, it was fun, it was great, and I'm glad we were all part of it.
Well, gentlemen, I've absolutely enjoyed this. I hope you have as well. And I will tell you this, and there's no hyperbole attached to this. I can look at it and say, as a 8, 9, 10-year-old growing up, and wanting, hey, we watched the shows. I'd go out on the lawn and practice Ozzie Smith, and I couldn't do the flip or anything like that, but practice what I learned on that Saturday or Sunday. And all these years later, I can say it's been instrumental, both the baseball bunch and This Week Baseball, in what I've been able to do. And that's where I got started. That's where baseball was sort of introduced to me. So I appreciate the efforts then, the fantastic shows that you put together, and I appreciate you taking the time today. Future health to all of you, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you, Steve.
Geoff Belinfante, Jody Shapiro, Rich Domich, all joining us here on our Lennox on Baseball live stream podcast. And that was absolutely a lot of fun to do. That, everyone that I've done, and I say I'm my own boss, and putting these together, it's been an absolute blast. This has absolutely been exactly what I was hoping to do weeks ago. And when I started this was going to be the one. And the next goal, and I might I might work with Geoff, Rich, and Jody as well, of getting the kids that were on the baseball bunch with Johnny Bench and all the great, they said future Hall of Famers, and there were so many of them on the show. Thursday, Marty Appel, who put me in touch with Geoff Belinfante, is going to join us. We're going to talk about his times with the Yankees, with PR. We're going to talk about social media today with baseball as well. Lennox on Baseball Facebook page, please give us a follow and a like, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube Lennox on Baseball channel as well. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody.